Hey everybody, we are back again. My husband Ray and I are joined by Natalie and Lee Lane from Oregon, and we are super stoked to have a chat with them about one of our client success stories with a dog named Bullet. Before we get started on that though, I wanted to flip it over to Natalie and Lee so they can introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about how they got into training, and then we'll keep going from there. So over to you two.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Ray. Great to be here. I'm Natalie.
Yep, I'm Lee.
And we got into balance training because of a dog that we had years ago that Lee found as a puppy. And I was originally trained as a positive reinforcement dog trainer way back when I was in high school, which is a great way to train when it comes to training behaviors that we want, such as sit and down and tricks and agility and all the fun stuff. But as we know, it's not the full spectrum when you're dealing with all behaviors. So when it came to Jack, he was the best dog that we ever had, but he turned into a 135-pound lab mix of some sort. We don't know what he was, but he was amazing and he was huge. And when he was about 8-10 months old, he just started developing fearful aggression and extreme reactivity towards anyone outside the house. And at the time, my training told me to ignore this behavior and it'll go away and we'll reward him when he's good, and then we'll ignore the bad stuff and the good stuff will stick and the bad stuff will just disappear. And of course, that's not realistic and that's not how it works. And it wasn't until he was 4.5 years old that we finally started working with a balance trainer who got us into this whole realm of dog training so that we had all the tools available, and we were able to go from not being able to walk him anywhere to being able to walk him in public, and he could be completely neutral in the presence of dogs, strangers, whereas before he would have pulled me over. He was too strong. So it was really cool to see him relax and become the best version of himself. And then amongst that time too, Lee, who used to work for Trees Inc., which was a
We clear fire breaks in California, so we'd follow the power lines everywhere they went to the very end, to the last dead end transformer. And so I would encounter tons and tons of dogs throughout that. I did that for 7 years, and whenever we'd have a pool that had aggressive dogs on it or anything like that, all my coworkers would just call me and be like, "Send Lee to go do that." I seem to get along with dogs very well, and that helped me want to do this because I could be around these aggressive dogs that had never even met me before and just be able to walk past them and not show them any fear and get my job done and turn around and leave.
Some of the dogs were like with the Mexican cartel, like some of the areas he had to go was pretty shady. Yes. So he kind of got baptized through fire when it came to having to deal with reactive dogs. But then too, around the time that we were working with the balance trainer with Jack, we were also involved in rattlesnake aversion training for dogs. And so that also opened up our realm of training into the world of e-collars and this whole other area of dog training. And we would travel all over the place to do clinics in Idaho and Nevada and Colorado and Utah and put on these clinics where we would train dogs to actively avoid rattlesnakes on their own, not just because somebody trained their dog a good leave it, but because the dogs recognized that's dangerous and you need, like, don't ever mess with that because it can kill you. So through that, and then the dog training that I had learned before, and then with Jack, it kind of all snowballed and we were able to kind of keep moving forward with dog training. So here we are.
I love this because your story mimics ours really closely. Jack sounds a whole lot like Luna, our dog, the reason that Corgi Canine exists. And Lee, well, first of all, Lee, thank you for doing what you did because we used to live in California. So I appreciate all the fire clearing, but also Ray's really similar as you are, as with his ability just to deal with the aggression cases. So like, very parallel universe here. I love it. But tell us, let's just jump right into Bullet's story. Tell us a little bit about Bullet. I love this because we just had an AMA where one of the questions was, is my dog too old for training? And so let's talk about Bullet.
There we go. So Bullet was, he wasn't what we were expecting in that, I had the initial phone call with the owner who was a sweetheart of a guy. and he got the dog as a rescue. And when he originally contacted Koru, he said that he thought the dog was around 12. After we met him, he said, you know, he actually might be closer to 14. I'm not sure. And we're like, okay. But when I had my phone call with him, he said, my dog is nervous around men. And I said, okay, so if you're out on a walk with Bullet and you're walking down the street and a man starts to walk by, not even trying to engage with Bullet, but just passes by, what does Bullet do? And he said, oh, he hides behind me and cowers. And I said, oh. And I said, okay, well, you know, very common. And to be fair, you know, it sounds like there could have been some things that happened in a bad roommate situation that could have led to Bullet having this feeling. But in my experience, if somebody says that their dog is nervous around men, usually what that means is, unless there's a reason that they've had a bad experience with men specifically, it usually means that they're actually nervous around all people, including strange women. It's just men have a greater presence than women do. I kind of equate it to if you get McCormick dried minced garlic, you know, like it smells like garlic. It's delicious, but very different from freshly minced garlic. Same thing, but it's kind of the equivalent of women to a dog. Their presence, their smell is like dried minced garlic, and men, freshly minced garlic. Same thing, but one's got a bigger presence, you know. So, but getting back to Bullet, we were expecting a dog that was going to be very fearful, reactive, and scared, right? Which is where it all stems from. But still, we've had dogs before where that's the description. You know, the owner loads them up in the crate. We get them home. They're barking, hitting the crate. They put on a big show. Lee will usually carry the entire crate into our kennel room, into the kennel, and then gear up and then stand next to the kennel and open the door. And the minute you open the door, the dog's like, nope, never mind. I'm kidding. It was all a bluff. I'm good here for the next 4 weeks. Like, never mind. So based on Bullet's owner's description, that's what we were expecting. A dog that was going to be reactive and dangerous in that regard, but nervous. So when I went to go pick up the dog, it was just me. I went to go pick him up, and having all of this in mind, I was shocked because I walk in and the owner had him on place, and he just laid there on his bed like a gargoyle, like, what's up? And I'm like, wow, okay. And now looking back, like that's my cue that this doesn't look like a nervous dog. This looks like a very confident dog, but he had no problem with me. I didn't try to touch him or anything. I just gave him space. But I remember thinking in my head, oh, this is going to be easy. Like, that's what I remember thinking. Like, wow, he knows place. Like, this is going to be amazing. So the owner loads him up in the crate, no issue with him. I even had to stop and pick up another dog on the way home. And when that owner, a woman, you know, approached my car and we loaded the other dog up into another crate in my car, Bullet never reacted towards her. And I'm like, okay. But then when we got home and Lee opened up the car door and he went bananas, I went, oh, wow. Like, the guy wasn't kidding. It is men. Men are a problem for this dog. He's terrified of men. So Lee carried the crate into the kennel room, Bullet's going crazy, and then he geared up, and we expected again for him to open the door and Bullet to go, no, I'm terrified. And it was the exact opposite. Lee opened, will you tell him what happened?
So I'm standing there, and like I said, I knew that he was frustrated, but I didn't realize that he wasn't fearful aggression at that time. And he came at me like a linebacker or a freight train. I mean, I opened the door, he came out, did a 180, and was just in my face jumping at me. And so at that point, I was just trying to keep him away from me so he didn't actually latch on, and I was able to get a slip lead over his neck and kind of pull him off to the side. But he kept that on for quite a few days. I mean, every time I'd go to get him out to go to the bathroom, you know, I was thinking, maybe we can just come up with a mutual agreement here, but he was coming in hot every single time. He wanted another piece of Lee. And when I think he would be calm, he'd be just sitting there and he'd sit there and wag his tail. And I'm like, okay, cool, we got it. And then all of a sudden he closes his mouth and look at me and it's like, it's on like Donkey Kong again. And he'd just come back in at me again. So it was definitely not exactly what we were anticipating.
Yeah. And two, I thought, oh, this dog is such a little stinker because he, Lee, we recognize that eye contact with a dog that's reactive can trigger him, so Lee was just like, dude, like all I'm trying to do is give you an opportunity to go to the bathroom. He wasn't asking him to sit or heel or walk nice, like just accept my presence and let's go to the bathroom. And Lee would do his best not to look at him, just keep an eye on him in his peripherals. And like, I'm not looking at you, but I started recognizing, because I'd be out there every time, with them. And I started recognizing that when Lee wasn't looking, Bullet's like, now's my chance. And he'd go, at first it was for his face, but he can reach his face. So, okay, then he would go for his gut. Well, that wouldn't work. So then he would go around Lee and come up from behind and try to get his ankles. And I'm like, you little punk, like you're like, it was clear that it was sport for him, like to put it lightly. And that's where we're like, this is very different. This is not a dog that's acting out of fear. He's acting from a place of like, this is what I do. This is what I was, this is who I am. And according to the owner, whoops, there went a light. He hadn't been like that before. Sorry. I lost the light. There we go. Anyway, it wasn't that wasn't anything that he had dealt with before, but because he was so old, one of the things that the owner warned us about was that he was developing arthritis and he couldn't take him on long walks because of his physical condition. And so now we were in this conundrum, like, okay, we need to work this dog through this, but can he handle it? Basically, like not, we would never want to do anything that would cause a dog physical distress. But on one hand, it's like, we've got to wear you out, but can you take it? And also too, where his behavior was so repetitive. I mean, he wouldn't go 3 seconds without trying to go after Lee. There was no peace. So is he at a place mentally where he just, maybe his brain is to a point where it's, like 10-second Tom from 50 First Dates, like he just wasn't able to retain. So based on his physical condition and then his questionable cognitive condition, we're like, we want a second opinion. And so on day 2, I called Damien from Seattle, Karoo Master Damien. And I told him, and I specifically wanted a guy, because I'm like, okay, like clearly it is more men than women, but I want to see what's up with a guy. And so I called Damien. I'm like, this is what we're dealing with. This is a unicorn of a case. And can we meet with you? We'll come to you, whatever. And he said, I'll meet you in Portland. So bless his heart, we drove to Portland. We have friends that have a fenced in backyard, and we got to Portland. Damien met us there so that he could give us his 2 cents on the situation. And yeah, and he agreed. He's like, oh no, this dog, he can do it. Mentally, he's definitely sharp. And I'll never forget it, because for a couple of days before we met with Damien, I think we met with Damien on like day 3 or 4 of Bullet being here with us. And up until then, him and Lee, like Bullet never won, but Bullet never surrendered, right? So they'd had a little relationship going for a couple of days. And when Bullet saw Damien, I will never forget it. And I wish I would have got it on camera, because he looked at Damien with the same smile that Pennywise from It would like get when he was about to like eat somebody. He was like, someone new. And it was like, oh my God. All right.
It was interesting, because for a quick second, he was like, I tried to chew on this guy for the last 3 or 4 days. This guy's fresh meat. And he just immediately was ignoring me and going straight for Damien.
Yep.
Yeah. One thing I want to illustrate for a lot of people, we've had this conversation with other trainers on these talks, is why are our programs so long? So one of the things is you guys are clearly illustrating that this can take several days of relationship building and moving at a pace that the dog gives you to be able to affect any kind of real change. Because a dog, when they're spun out and they're in that mentality of just doing whatever they're going to do, are not in a position to learn anything new yet. So they have to kind of come down, and sometimes that could take better part of a week or week and a half before you're in that position. So, if you're not taking your time, you're going to create even more conflict and more problems. And the other thing I'm hearing just from you guys describing the situation is that the dog was definitely reinforced on some of these negative behaviors. So every time he pushed or flexed, people reacted. They're like, oh, so what did he learn? You know, every time I step up on somebody, they react to it in this way, and then I win this game. So this becomes a game. So after you've had this period of kind of getting to know Bullet, and you've had Damien put eyes on him, you know, what did that change the way you guys approached your training plan?
Yes, it definitely did. And what you're saying is exactly true. I mean, if I would have pushed on Bullet in any shape, way, or form, it would have just made it worse. I would have just been a catalyst. So I just needed to be able to be neutral around him, but get him out of that mind frame. So we wound up both helping. I geared up and I held on to Bullet, and Damien came around behind us both and helped us get a muzzle on him because he was really crazy. I mean, he was a very good dog, but in that particular moment, he was very dangerous. And so it took both of us to get a muzzle on him. And then once we did get the muzzle on, it was able to take that just completely out. Now he can't bite you anymore. And he was smart. He knew that. And so once he realized, okay, I can get out of fight mode now, he was able to calm down and relax. And once he was able to relax, then we were able to start communicating with each other and actually starting a friendship. I could actually reach down and pet him a little bit. And he's like, okay, I'm not going to bite him because I can't bite him. So he was in a position where he had to accept it. And then later we started realizing, like, oh, hey, this is actually kind of nice. I don't like being like that all the time.
Yeah, dogs are, I mean, you know, dogs are opportunistic. And so it was amazing. Once that muzzle went on, not that it fixed everything, but you could see he was like, oh, snap, you know, like, I don't have the option to bite. So what can I do? And then his brain was able to relax. And Lee's like, how about you do this? How about we just walk together? And he was like, it's kind of nice, you know? And so then they could start building a relationship, and then we could start introducing more behaviors and, you know, a structured walk and refining place and just doing stuff around the yard. I mean, the final thing was at the end, his board and train was 4 weeks, and that 4th week was when everything started to really come together. I mean, we were able to take him to the beach, no muzzle. I'd say by about halfway through the 3rd week, we were able to start taking the muzzle off of him. And, you know, everything had been, you know, everything good had to come from Lee. So access, attention that he actually wanted, you know, affection, food and water, everything had to come from Lee. And so he started to change his perspective about Lee and go, okay, well, this guy's actually showing me a pretty good time. Maybe I'll give him the time of day. So we took him to the beach. Lee was able to give him a shower out in the front yard, which he enjoyed. But yeah, by the 4th week, there was no muzzle anymore, which was amazing to, you know, for him to go from being so reactive in the beginning to muzzle off, and, you know, like they could shake paws. It was pretty cool. It was pretty special. So
that is amazing. Now, when you were describing his behavior, my first reaction was, did this dog do bite work before? Or did he have live bites on him? Like, do you know any of the history there, or just because he was a rescue, maybe we don't know?
According to the owner, no, nothing.
Since he was a puppy, pretty much.
Well, no, he got him as a rescue when he was a few years old.
Oh, just a couple of puppies.
And according to the owner, no, nothing, no problems. So
Yeah, I mean, what you guys also described is the no free lunch policy, about how everything positive in that dog's life needs to come from the owner. And this is why that, in conjunction with structured walks, help redefine relationships that are broken. So when we're talking to these owners and they're complaining about, let's just say it's resource guarding or something, and then they start asking, well, why are we focusing on this no free lunch policy, or why are we focusing on healing? Why is that so important? Could you guys just break that down for anybody who's got a new dog that might be like Bullet? Why focusing on a structured walk, and why really reeling everything back to like a no free lunch policy is so important in fixing the overall picture?
got it. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, dogs don't understand how hard we all work to give them the best life possible. You know, like, they don't have any understanding that when their person is gone all day, they're out working, to be able to afford to buy not just food, but treats and toys and a nice house to stay in and vet care and training. And again, everything good in a dog's life comes from their person, and they don't understand that. So the best way to kind of reiterate, like, hey, you know, everything good in your life does come from me. And it doesn't mean that you have to be mean or draconian, you know, to get this message across. But, you know, existential feeding, especially in the beginning, is so beneficial, because not only is the food coming directly from you as opposed to this inanimate bowl where food just magically appears, which can devalue food over time as well. But you can use those moments to, you know, hand feed your dog, work on basic training. Like I tell people, especially if you get you know, if you have a puppy or a rescue, take however much food they would normally get in a meal, put it in a treat bag or whatever, and just play the name game. You know, like if your dog's name is Valkyrie, you know, Valkyrie, yes, treat, Valkyrie, you know, and teach them their name that way, or use their food just to build basic behaviors, which in all honesty, you know, whenever we see a dog that doesn't want to eat kibble at home, you know, and we've met some people who the owners are cooking better for their dogs than they are themselves because their dog won't eat. And it's like, well, because dogs are programmed to want to work for their food, you know, in some way or another. They're all descended from wolves, and it's in their DNA that, you know, they want to work for food in some capacity. So, you know, that's one tool in your arsenal, but that's not everything. You know, the 4 rewards that dogs are willing to work for once they're in the right state of mind, you know, food, attention, affection, toys, if it's a toy they actually want, and then access. So that's a huge one that people can use throughout the day. You know, if you know that your dog wants to go outside and they're standing over by the door, you know, put your hand on the door, ask for a simple sit, you know, which is the equivalent of please. Please equals eye contact, no barking, simple sit. So put your hand on the door, you know, sit, yes, open the door. You know, I just granted you access to where you wanted to go. So we start using that on day 1, especially if a dog isn't ready to take food from us yet. We'll use, you know, say please before you leave the kennel, before you leave the crate, before we go outside, before we take you into the pen to go do your business. So it just starts, it's just this little micro session that you can use throughout the day, every day, that compounds, and the dog starts looking at you like, okay, before I get the things that I want, I have to show a little sign of respect. And it's not like we're asking them, you know, before you get food, you have to go herd, you know, 100 cattle before sunup, you know, like, no, like it's just a little micro session that you can utilize throughout each day, and it transfers, it compounds over time, and it translates to the dog like, okay, like this person, they got my best interest in mind, you know? So yeah, it's hugely beneficial. And again, you know, the dog has to be not in that reactive state of mind to get there. So, you know, once Bullet calmed down and was ready to kind of accept that information.
It's like you're saying too, movement's medicine. So when we could walk together and just reinforce that we've been together for 10 minutes now and nothing bad's happened, and all we're doing is just walking together, then boom, we can pick that, go right back to the kennel, and the more cookies we put in that jar and take out of the biting frustration jar, then he realizes that this is a better way. You know, we're not rehearsing that bad behavior over and over again.
Yeah, and it's such a gradual, slow process. Like, you know, we've heard and discussed on other podcasts or talks about these shorter programs, and people, you know, companies offering like 2 and 3 week programs, and they're guaranteeing the world. Let's just say you had 2 weeks with Bullet. Like, where was Bullet in about the 2 week mark?
At 2 weeks, he was still wearing his muzzle. He would still muzzle punch me from time to time, just try a little bit. So he would wind up getting a light correction there. But we were not in a condition for me to take the muzzle off of him yet and go on a walk without him trying to redirect or come at me. So
Bullet was like a combination of all 3 main characters from No Country for Old Men. Like, he was Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, and Tommy Lee Jones, like all rolled up into one. But yeah, 2 week mark, muzzle was still on.
He was still reactive towards other people and other dogs, so he couldn't hold a nice structured walk. It wasn't just towards me. he would be frustrated because he was trying to control the situation, try to wrap his head around the leash, stuff like that still. So no, we were maybe halfway there. Yeah, at the 2-week mark.
Yeah, I love some of the things that you guys are saying and how you're saying them. And I love all the references to like pop culture movies. It's hilarious, by the way. But you said something that I can't say it enough to owners. The reward is what the dog wants, not what the human wants. We have to find what works for the dog. So positive reinforcement is what the dog wants, not necessarily what the owner wants to give. And then also the attention to detail that you guys have. Everything in their life adds up. Those little sits before you leave, all of that adds up in a dog's life. So if you have a dog like Bullet out there, or even, just minor behaviors, starting with those little small baby steps it's critical, and you'll start to see success after that. And then also, this is just a plug for Koru Canine. I love that you guys worked with Damien. That is one of the things that I am so grateful for with our team, is that everyone works well together and we can bounce the ideas off each other, because, not one human has all the answers. So that is the value of working with Koru, is we have some amazing people on this team. But now that we've got Bullet through the program and he's doing amazing, now it's time to get him back home with the owner. So talk to me a little bit about that go home lesson and how that went, and the owner's reaction. He had to be blown away. So let's talk about how that went.
Okay, so we took him home, and his owner was thrilled. I mean, at the same time, according to the owner, there hadn't been any aggressive tendencies towards anybody. It was more nervousness, but still, we had kept in contact with him throughout the stay, and told him what we were witnessing as far as, you've got a gladiator here. He may be 12, 13, 14, 30 years old, who knows, whatever, but he is, Clint Eastwood, get off my lawn. And he's and again, dangerous. Yes. But also it was kind of amazing to behold, that spirit that was in that dog, and the intelligence that he was still so sharp and able to learn something completely new. So his owner was really, really happy and felt more confident knowing that he had structure to fall on when it came to, how to navigate taking him on a walk, how to navigate if somebody came over. And, we were very clear, like, this isn't the kind of dog that if you're on a walk and someone's like, oh my God, he's so cute, can I pet him? Like, absolutely not. No, this is your dog. You have him for you. And I think that was the kind of the rhythm that he already had in play, and that's why there hadn't been any problems. So he was very comfortable having a dog that wasn't going to be everybody's best friend. He was very fine with that. But when we took him home, it went fantastic. Structured walk went great. He did place very well. But once he got back in, and we warned people about this, once he got back into his house at the very last 10 minutes of the go home, we told him, we said, we want to test him a little bit. Might as well test him with us. So he had him on place on a back tie, just in case. And then Lee and him would shake hands, or at one point then went in for a hug, and Bullet's like, no, and he started to revert, but then we were able to correct, and nope, back on place. Like, it's not your job to go after anybody that comes in contact with your dad. If somebody puts their hands on your dad in a way that's nefarious, you'll know, but that's not what this is right now. Your owner has every right to give someone a hug or shake someone's hand without you thinking that you need to go on guard. So he did start to revert, and I warn everybody, that go home session, that 2-hour go home session is so critical for setting the tone moving forward. And I equate it to, if you go to another country like France for 4 weeks, you're going to be immersed in a new language. You're going to pick up on that new language. You're going to learn a new language. But the minute you land back in America, you're never going to expect to have to speak French. And that's what it's like when dogs go home. They think everything I learned on the Oregon coast with those people, well, that only applies there. And that doesn't apply here at home, where I've lived for years and I have my routine and I'm going to fall back into my routine. So immediately getting the dog, transferring that over, having the owner take the reins and having the owner be that leader to be like, no, 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 I speak this language now too. I've been getting biweekly updates. You know, I know what's going on here, and what you just learned, that applies here too. So it's a really cool moment. It's a nerve-wracking moment because it's so important, you know, as far as setting the tone and making sure the owner's ready to take the reins and implement that new language immediately, because it starts immediately. So, but it went well. I mean, you know, we were able to work through that, and I'm glad that he did start to kind of revert. So we had an opportunity to correct and set the tone again. And then what was really special, you know, we had a follow-up session that went great. And then a year later, I get a text message from his owner, and it was so cute. He said, hey, you know, it's so-and-so. I don't know if you remember my dog, Bullet, but we're like, oh my God. And he says, but I'm going out of town for 10 days. And I was wondering if I could have him boarded with you guys. And we're like, you know, here we go, you know, like, how's this going to go down? And so we went and picked the dog up, kept everything really neutral, brought the dog home in a muzzle, just in case. Like, we're setting the tone, and we don't want to give you any opportunity. And I swear to God, on day one, it was like Bullet was looking at Lee like, okay, never mind. And he was, I don't want to say a completely different dog, because it's not like we ever trusted him to like get in his face and get kisses, but he was so happy. He came here and his tail was wagging, and they would go through the agility course together.
He did really good. We had him put the muzzle on just for safety for Bullet. We didn't want him to go backwards in any shape, way, or form, and us have a conflict, since we ended on such a good note. So I let him. He kept the muzzle on until the end of the night, and I was thinking, well, maybe I'll leave it on to see how you are in the morning. But he was so good, and I didn't want him to get any boo-boos on his face for having to wear it for too long. So we took it off, and we didn't have any issues the whole time. I mean, like Natalie said, I didn't get down there and kiss him on his face like I do a lot of the other dogs, but I could pet him. He'd roll over and let me pet his belly and stuff like that. So it was pretty amazing, and it was a very proud moment, but not just for me and Natalie and what we were able to accomplish with Bullet, but it was a proud moment for me, for Bullet, because this older dog retained this information. He's living such a better life. He got to go on this little vacation while his dad was going, and he didn't have to stress out or fight or anything. He just got to have food and go on walks and go to the beach. And so it was really cool.
Yeah, it's like some dogs just have to have like every aspect of their lives just kind of mapped out for them. What do they need to be doing at any given moment? And if that's not clearly defined, they come off the rails. And some of them come off the rails really hard. And that sounds like Bullet. You know, he needed kind of the cruise director to tell him exactly where his next activity was for the day. And a lot of people don't get that. You know, some dogs are just fine, just kind of hanging out and just doing whatever. But other dogs, they just not about that life. They need to have that structure in place. And that's why it's so important, these little tidbits that you guys are giving these owners, that they follow them to the T. And I'm glad you brought up that extinguishing period. Your analogy with going to France is the same. You know, I've been to Italy a bunch, and by the end of the trip, I'm starting to bust out some sentences and feeling confident. And then I come home and I forget it all. And then we go back and I got to start from scratch. So it's the same deal. But yeah, they will almost always try to flex when they come home and try to go back to that behavior, because they remember that what they can get away with in the past. And that is just something good for people at home to know, that they don't come back trained as like a robot and they just perform things. They have to actually, this is where the owners have to step in and actually take what you've said, implement the plan and the structure and the commands, and follow it through 100%, especially those first critical weeks when they come home. So I think that's a great point to make. This sounds like an amazing transformation story. And I honestly, when, you know, I was taking clients on a regular basis, I prefer like the man eaters and stuff like that, because typically the owners were more invested in listening to everything I told them to do than other owners that were just kind of like, well, Fluffy jumps on the counter every now and then, we're okay with that, you know, and they start to let things slide. But when it's kind of life or death, or somebody could get actually injured by a dog, this is where, you know, typically those owners are well invested in doing what we ask them to do. And the ideal clients for me anyway were those types anyway. So I don't know if you guys thought that the same with this owner, but I mean, those were my preferences.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. When I think a lot of our clients, I mean, I have to say, I feel like Koru somehow finds amazing people. There's so many clients that we've met and worked with that it's like, God, I mean, and so many of them become friends, and we
Yeah.
still stay in touch and
I
get
mean,
together. And
we've actually played games and had campfires and
Yeah.
stuff like that with
With
some of our clients that
some of
could
these-
come back over and hang out and
Yeah.
bring their dogs with us. And
some of these people they're amazing, but I think a lot of it is dogs' behavior has gotten to a point where it's a behavior they can't ignore anymore, and it's getting scary, you know. And they love their dog so much, and yet, just like Jack, you know, again, best dog we've ever had, but he was such a liability, and he was so you're not a dog, you're a cat. But our worst nightmare was him making a terrible mistake, and then we would be liable, and not only would we be in trouble financially, but we could lose him.
yeah,
That's where I can't imagine. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people that we work with, they're very dedicated, and they're very, very motivated. And at the same time too, we've had a lot of people who they do just want, you know, their dog is beautiful and sweet and doesn't have a reactive bone in its body thus far, but they want to set their dog up for success and have the best relationship possible. And so we've had a lot. I mean, I'd say 99% of our clients have been extremely passionate and dedicated, but there's nothing like pressure, and when the problem's, you know, in your face, that you're like, I got to do something about this. But
well, especially because, I mean, you know, these are our family members.
yeah,
And so we want to do everything we can to protect them, and just don't want anything to happen to them. And you don't want anything to happen to the family because your dog made a wrong decision because you weren't guiding him.
yep, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I love everything that you said. And just to kind of build on what you guys were saying, and then Ray picked up on as well, that go home lesson, dogs learn in pictures, patterns, and repetitions. So even, you know, to use my dog Cairo, for example, when we used to do protection work together, like he was a rock star on the field that we would train on all the time, but then we would have to go to other fields to work through behaviors and maybe take some steps back to build up, just to proof those behaviors in others' environments. So I really want owners to hear that and understand this is all a part of the learning process. And that there's nothing wrong if your dog regresses. In fact, like you guys said, that was a great learning moment for Bullet and his owner to have that. So it's kind of like reprogramming a human mindset to go, oh man, maybe my dog had a setback, but this is a good opportunity to learn. So I love that you guys had that with him. So when was that boarding situation? Do we know how he is now? I know he's a little older, so.
When he came back for boarding, when was that? It was almost exactly a year later. So it will have been 2 years this summer, I'm pretty sure. Time's just flying by. But it was a solid year later that he came back. And I'm nervous to ask, like I'm terrified to text and be like, how is he? Like, is he still with us? Because that one's gonna touch our hearts when that guy finally goes over the Rainbow Bridge. But I mean,
It's just another person who's absolutely in love with his dog. I mean, look at the training that he had him go through, and he did follow through with it. And like when he dropped him off last time and we were picking him up, he was crying, you know. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's kind of a hard question to ask, but
yeah,
we're hoping that he's just doing great.
yep, living his best life.
That's amazing. I don't know. The stories like this are always amazing. I mean, you got to realize what we do this for, and we've changed so many lives by helping their dogs and having these people repair their relationships and speak dog. You know what I mean? So there's no conflict out there. One thing I know we've asked other people. You guys kind of alluded to this in the beginning, but I want to ask this from each of you guys. What is your why? I mean, why do you train dogs? You know, what personally do you get out of it, and what drove you to this career path? And I know for a lot of people it's very personal, and you guys had a little bit of that in the beginning of this thing, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from each of you.
God. It's been a journey. In the beginning, I just love animal training. You know, I always wanted to work at like a zoo or an aquarium in animal training. I love animal training. It's so much fun. And then I think the big kicker was after Jack specifically, when we had such a problem with him, and again, we dealt with it for 4 years. And then once we realized how to fix it, and then there was the regret, like, gosh darn it, you know, we should have done this sooner. And I felt so guilty not knowing how to address his reactivity. And he had to be so sheltered for those first 4 years of his life, right? Until he was 4.5. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, we can take you anywhere. We can take you everywhere. I feel comfortable walking you amongst people and kids and other dogs, as long as nobody was allowed to come into his personal space. Disclaimer. He was 100. He could be completely neutral in the presence of chaos, but we did have to tell people, you know, you can't pet my dog. I know he looks cute, but I'm telling you, if you try to pet him, it's not going to go well. So please don't pet him. But then, you know, as like we used to live in Magalia, which is a little town right above Paradise. And then, you know, the fire happened and we moved here, and I started working at the local paper just to get a job and build up credit. He was working as a heavy equipment mechanic. And I would see people with dogs and they had problems, and it was like, oh God, I know we can, you know, I know what this dog needs. I know what we can do here. And I just started kind of craving it, in like, I know what to do. Like, I know what to do. I know how to help your dog, you know, and it just started getting like kind of almost like a drive. Like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And I know I can help this person. And I know where you're at. I know what it's like to have a dog that you love so much, but is so reactive. And I know we can help. So that was for me. And then him, poor thing, I started working for Cover in 2021. I started doing board and train in 2022. And he was already helping me on the sides. And I told him, like, dude, like, you're better at this than I am. Like, all the dogs loved him so much, and he has such great energy for it. And just things with family, the way things were going, it just seemed like a good opportunity. I mean, I don't know. I drug him into it.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say drug. My whole life I've been around animals, and we had St. Bernards growing up, and then we had Brasileiro Filas after that, big dogs. And so to me, it was just like a godsend. I mean, one of my favorite parts about my job in California was that I was outside in the woods all the time, and I get to see the animals, and I get to run into these dogs, even though some of them wanted to attack me. I was still like, wow, that's a pretty dog, or that's a gorgeous dog. But then too, just I love to fix things and help. Like I'm always helping people, even though I got so much stuff to do. I'm still now. It's like, what are you doing? And I'm just trying to help. Like, well, they needed help. So being able to do this for other people, like Natalie said too, and allowing them to be able to enjoy their animals to their fullest extent, and their animals too, you know, their family members being able to enjoy their lives to their fullest extent, is what I think really does it for me. And in a field like this, you're always learning. I mean, just like mechanics, you never know it all. And so I like that too. The job's never boring. Every dog's going to be different. Every owner is going to be a little bit different on how you try to approach them, so that they can take these tools home and apply them to their animals. So that's super cool about the job as well, is that you're just always learning and meeting new cool people and more cool dogs. I mean, I love it when we play the guessing game now. It's like, we got another dog. You want to guess what it is? And we'll go off the name and we'll try to decide what dog it is. And
what kind of breed.
And then it's just cool finding out. It's like, oh yeah, I haven't seen one of those in a long time. So that's exciting too. It's almost like just meeting a whole new friend all over again. So
I think, yeah, there's so many different dog breeds. Well, you know, there's so many different dog breeds that you're like, oh, someday I'd love to have a blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of fun because we get like a little taste of all these different breeds, you know, just in a year. And every dog that comes here, you know, there's a lot of breeds where we would never think of having one ourselves. But for me, you know, every dog that winds up coming here for board and train, even Bullet, you know, even some crazy hyper dog where you need an extra cup of espresso in the morning before you start working with them. We wind up falling in love in some way or another with every dog that we host here, which I think is important because that dog means a lot to somebody. So, you know, I think it's important that, you know, you keep things obviously very structured, very professional. You know, we're the trainers, we're not their owners, but to kind of see in every dog we work with a sliver of what their owner sees, you know, and I think that definitely moves us because while that dog's here with us, it's our dog for 3, 4, 5, 8 weeks, you know, whatever it is. And so, you know, we kind of treat it like that, like, dude, we want you to succeed. Like, you mean something to us too, and we want you to be the best version of yourself possible. So.
You guys, my heart. Ugh. I hope everybody can see what beautiful souls you are. Like this, just hearing that is amazing. And I love that you two work together as a couple. I mean, obviously that's how Ray and I started Koru Canine, is it was just he and I back then. But I think what you said is the perfect way to wrap this up for people. You guys are incredible. We are so grateful that you trust us, you know, and Bullet, just amazing, you know. As Damien said in our trainer talk, if your dog is healthy in an old age, I think what you guys have discussed about Bullet, there's no reason we can't give that dog a better life at the end of his life. So thank you both of you for doing that. And I hope you'll come back because this was, I wish people could see me off camera smiling and like holding back tears when you guys were talking. This was great. So, but for now, everyone out there, if you want your dogs trained by Natalie and Lee, and you should, hit us up at korucanine.com, all the social platforms at Koru Canine, and we will be back again very soon. Thank you all.